Welcome back, boys. Today we have one from Whatifalthist. Everything is mate suppression. Let's check it out.
Jim Keller hit me up after about a year ago. My friend Jim Keller hit me up after watching my video on Mouse Utopia. He loved the video and said it got him thinking about a core theory of his that he wanted to run past me. It took him like an hour to explain fully, but he said that so much of modern culture is a form of mate suppression. That was a theory that existed beforehand, but which he articulated in very cogent terms. What that means is that everything in our society is imposing costs on others to lessen their chances of reproductive success, normally carried out by those in power who aren't hurt by those costs in the same way. Jim asked me to poll my audience for how many were aware of the concept of mate suppression. I told him I thought most people in these circles already knew about the concept, and I was horrified that only a small minority of my audience knew what it was. I told Jim then that I'd make a video on the topic, and the video's been stewing in my mind ever since. So thanks for the idea. As time has passed, it's consistently grown in my mind more. A year ago, I had a sense that a lot of our culture was mate suppression, but as more time passed, in which I perceived the world through those new goggles, I kept finding the rabbit hole went deeper and deeper. This video is the end point of a year of thinking about how literally every single element of our society is built off mate suppression. Things I never even thought about, like the current religion, manners, culture, government, and values, only make sense through the lens of those with power trying to raise the costs of reproduction for everyone else. I hope it horrifies you as much as it did me.
Very interesting. Let's learn about this.
These videos take a while to make, which means I spend a lot of time sitting at my desk hard at work, and I need a comfortable place to... The link below, just...
Now back.
1. What the fuck is the World Economic Forum? I've always been in complete shock that the World Economic Forum actually exists. I'm from Philly, whose elite were old school WASPs, whose ancestors were on the Mayflower 400 years ago, and I just assumed, until after I left Pennsylvania, that that's what all of America's elite were like, much like they were 50 years ago. However, as I spent more time on the coasts, before settling down where I am now in Texas, I realized a completely new elite had taken over the Western world, nearly completely replacing the old WASPs, while claiming to be superior to the WASPs as their right to rule, while in fact the WEF were vastly more tyrannical in every conceivable way. I've been meaning to make a strategic analysis of the WEF, or World Economic Forum, for the longest time. I ordered a bunch of books by Klaus Schwab I am yet to read, since I find their existence in itself really fascinating as a sort of example for how strange the human condition can get. This is one of the things I frequently think about, where I try to find different people or civilizations, where I look at them and think, how did creation produce you? How were you the natural incentive structure of the world? Because everyone and everything is the logical culmination of their circumstances. Our era of history, and especially our elite, are easily one of the strangest ever in human history, or the most removed from the natural anthropological average of the universal person. I made a video, one of my...
No, I know about this. The kind of elite, you could say. They are so fucking detached from the people, of their subjects, you could say. Before, at least like the kind of superiors or the people above you, they knew your circumstances and they knew your living conditions. But now, I mean, I don't think they have any fucking idea how people actually live. They just kind of like, okay, let's bring in some, I don't know, immigration here, and like they don't see what the fuck is happening with the people and the culture, and yeah, I mean, fuck.
favorites talking about the most extreme societies. A few things seem unbelievable to me about the WEF-style elites. The first of which is they belong to a purely artificial culture. This is another concept I want to talk about in the future, but most societies in history develop organically. They are rooted in a certain geographic area with a certain ethnicity, religion, and culture built around a shared history. Then you have strange artificial societies that only exist inside bureaucratized, urbanized civilizations that tend to fold when put on.
Yeah, it's like they don't truly appreciate the kind of differences in culture and beauty and stuff that cultures have to offer, because they go to these like Western main like shitholes, and everything is the same. The people are the same. The buildings are the same. Everything is fucking the same in these like capitals. They go to, they fly to, you know, private jet from here to here to here to here, and it's like everything, the world seems so like the same, but they don't walk the fucking small streets and truly take in the culture and the differences in people in different lands. Like, they don't see this shit.
Under pressure, bureaucratized, urbanized civilizations that tend to fold.
Or maybe they do. I don't fucking know. Oh.
When put under bureaucratized, urbanized civilizations that tend to fold when put under pressure. They don't follow the rules of normal societies since they don't have to fight for survival. Thus, you see strange developments and growths completely unrelated to practicality. My mom would make moonshine in our garage growing up, and so I would see the vats of beer, and sometimes you just drop way too much yeast into the culture, and then you see the beer turn out in really strange ways due to this strange oversupply of yeast. And that's how I feel about a lot of these cultures. America is split at the 100th parallel between organic societies that go back to Europe and the East Coast versus the American West, which developed culturally in a wealthy, atheist, safe, car-oriented 20th century. The European Union is an artificial culture propped up on the corpse of the old European organic nations. Same thing with Dubai, communism, or what I call modern civilization in general. Washington, D.C. is an island of artificial culture in the organic East Coast. The World Economic Forum is modernity personified to a level of parody. They are so artificial as a culture, they don't even realize how ridiculous they are. In fact, the World Economic Forum builds its right to rule off destroying organic culture. Nietzsche talks about life-affirming versus life-denying religions. When religions first form, they are these overpowering psychic forces which completely remake culture and people's perception of reality in their image. They transport people to different mental dimensions and give the cultures that take said religion greater strength, intelligence, wisdom, love, and cooperation. All successful religions or cultures start like this. However, over time, every religion goes from mysticism to bureaucratized decay. For decadent societies, or those in their decline, the culture is purely negative, imposing costs on the people involved. A good culture or religion are like night vision goggles that enhance your perception, while bad or life-denying ones actively blind you. Nietzsche, writing around 1880, said that in the early 21st century, due to the wealth and comfort brought about by the Industrial Revolution, combined with a degenerated moral code stemming originally from Christianity, that the West would grow incredibly weak, supporting a completely life-denying moral code. Nietzsche said that the
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like, of course, materialism and all that shit becomes kind of the new god. When people start to question traditions and religion and God and all that, when like their material wealth completely like exploded, and then they turn around and they look at the old traditions and the old faith, and they're like, I think I'm gonna go this way because I'm gonna get more shit and more money. Like, you know, It's
social code of supporting a completely life-denying moral code. Nietzsche said that the social code of the 21st century would be the most life-denying ever in history, with a social principles built off tearing others down to attain equality, destroying beauty or excellence, thus creating a culture too weak to produce healthy human life, excellence, procreate, or even fight for its own survival. He called this the age of the last men. I cannot believe how unself-aware the World Economic Forum types are. It's almost as if they're demonically possessed by completely nihilistic suicidal ideas, which are driving them mad, shutting off even the ability to realize what they're doing. The WEF openly pushes for degrowth or the deindustrialization of the Western world. They openly push for shoving the population into a new serfdom, the destruction of their own civilization, and the imitation and glorification of legitimately totalitarian regimes like China. I can already hear people writing this off, and I'm so tired in our culture that every single appeal to do something like this collapsing society is replied with complacency and nihilism. People are about to lose everything they love, and they couldn't care less. People will say that the World Economic Forum is just a committee, which is technically true in the same way as saying America is just a band of territory in central North America. Moderns really like using a facade of logic to, in reality, argue that whatever bullshit they believe is totally true and you can't question it. It's rationalization. The WEF is incredibly important given it's a mouthpiece for the managerial class which completely dominates the modern world. A short list of the political leaders who have or are members of the World Economic Forum include Joe Biden, the EU Commissioner, Zelensky, Trump, as well as business moguls like Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a completely obvious elite power interest, which you're an idiot if you ignore. The areas that tend to be the base for the WEF today are the former Calvinist regions, such as New England, New York, Canada, Scotland, Eastern England, the Netherlands, southern France, Strasbourg, Berlin, and others. This makes sense to me, given Calvinism is probably the harshest branch of Christianity ever, in which they said it wasn't under our control whether we got into heaven, but rather a cruel God picked out the anointed in advance, and so there's no real free will, while they banned celebrating Christmas on top of having 6-hour church services. This was back in the 17th century. These areas just replaced one
6 hours. Damn.
This was back in the 17th century. These areas just replaced one highly stringent, nihilistic, self-loathing religion for another. At least with Calvinism, you have a highly functional, intact society and get heaven. The left doesn't even offer that. The WEF sets a precedent for the opinions of the Western ruling class. That's why the WEF itself does not have much power, but very frequently you'll see ideas the WEF pushes become applied to actual policy very quickly. That since the managerial order is a kind of hive mind of which the WEF is a mouthpiece. The leftist managerial order is captured by a sort of toxic, suicidal mob mentality. The reason I'm talking about the WEF here is that they're a sort of measuring tool. Much like when a river floods, you can see certain markers for how high the water got to say, damn, that was a bad flood. The fact that the West's ruling class and dominant culture is one which literally, publicly champions degrowth, slavery, and suicide means something is very wrong. Things are this bad, and people don't seem to notice or figure it out. People are so complacent these days. Anyone who has the slightest standard or backbone is vociferously attacked in this culture. This entire society is trying to turn us into serfs.
Yeah, I mean, most people are so distracted with like all the distractions of the phone, social media, and just general, just people in their lives. Where they don't have these ideas to think about. Like,
more time passes, I've become more sympathetic to the old school Marxists. For those who watch this channel regularly, my loathing of communism has become a sort of meme, but the thing with Mao or Stalin is at least they were progressive humanists. They believed humanity could attain incredible things, they wanted to achieve utopia, build new stuff, get rich, make technology, and the like. The thing with the current WEF elite is they just don't want positive things. They're actively against technological progress, unless it's tech that lets them enslave the public more easily. They're actively trying to shrink the population and economy or destroy the culture. What the fuck happened here? How does this make any sense? Furthermore, how did this happen in a democratically elected governmental system? How did voting publics choose to commit their own suicide? Part 2. Luxury beliefs. Rob Henderson, who I apparently have a bunch of mutual friends with, developed a really useful idea for the collective discourse, of which I am very thankful. Henderson grew up poor in the foster care system, which gives him a distinct perspective in modern America's mostly classist society. I'm convinced a significant part of wokeness is just forcing the public to focus on race or sex so the elites can get away with horrifying class repression. It's insane the left started out with technically being the working class's defenders to loathing them. It almost feels like a spurned lover. Modern America has the lowest social mobility in any time of our nation's history. You're the most likely to born and die in the same state of any era in American history.
Over here in Norway too, social mobility is horrendous. You're stuck. It's insane what the fuck is happening.
We have the die in the same state of any era in American history. We have the highest inequality and most entrenched class structure of any era in American history. 60% of kids at the top 20 universities are from families in the top 1% of income. As a bourgeois identifying individual, the class repression that the left is doing now is completely horrible, and it's even worse in that this is a society which pretends to care about the downtrodden and help them. Henderson talks a lot about how almost everything the woke push is something that imposes costs on normal people, which the elites are able to get out of due to their higher status. The easiest example is how wealthy Hollywood people will talk about how depolicing is important, while they all live in their own gated communities with security guards and a parallel society. When Seth Rogen said that when your car is broken, just buy another.
Yeah, it was like also with like migration. It was like, yeah, let the migrants in, but don't let them in my neighborhood. Like, yo, wait, stop. Like that. That's basically what is happening, bro. Fuck.
Is when Seth Rogen said that when your car is broken, just buy another, is such a horrible summation, which is practically our ages let them eat cake. Watch my video on the 1960s from my wonderful second podcast, History 102, where I argue that almost every single social change that came about from the 1960s, of which we are living in the very obvious aftermath, is hurting the social commons. Things like religion, a shared culture, patriotism, family values, community, and social ties are all things that benefit normal people. This isn't even in a little or a small unimportant way, where, for example, if you have children inside wedlock and are religious, the statistical chances you end up in poverty are very, very low. I'm sure we've all seen the stats about the insane negative effects of fatherlessness. When you look at stuff from the old America and wonder why it appears to be a vastly superior society in every conceivable way than today, it's because it was a society that actually upheld the commons. One of the best books on society today is The Revolt of the Elites by Christopher Lasch. It's a book written in the 90s, but it could have been written today since it's so prescient. His thesis is that the cultural changes of the post-1960s world were all a move by the elites to rebel against any sense of social duty. The reason they push against nation, religion, culture, family, and other things is that these are all social ties that impose costs on their freedom of action. They are barriers to their untrammeled authority. Lash goes through every single element of American life, between the death of patriotism, genuine education about teaching facts, the death of neighborhoods, real art, noblesse oblige, and moral values, to show how we've lost any interest in supporting our fellow man. A take I'm going to throw in here is from one of my favorite historians, Carol Quigley, where he talks about the death of the British Empire was in many ways an alliance between the nobility and the labor unions to shut down British competitive markets against the rest of the world by regulating the British economy. And secondarily, through killing the empire, it meant the pre-established British elites could have control of power, while young men would not go out into the empire, gain status there, and come back to Britain to change the social structure. And this is the case with a lot of European empires, where the social authorities demilitarized the populations, getting rid of guns and getting rid of the empire, because if the population was armed and doing stuff, it would make them stronger to resist the regime, and it would create social tension. What our elites do is pick some abstract group to support, which they have no genuine relation to, and then use that as a way to avoid having to deal with any group they are in actual proximity to. This is the origin of the chart that went viral online that shows that leftists value non-human cellular life and people who have not yet been born in their worldview to their neighbors, friends, and family. The thing is that no one can enforce your treatment of non-cellular life, so you can value it infinitely without actually having to bear any cost as an individual, while for the people in your real life, that involves actually doing stuff which is more difficult. Everything in the left is making someone else pay for a cost to make you look more virtuous. I'm from the Rust Belt, and so even as a teenager, I assessed I had practically no prospects, and I remember having a panic attack in senior year when I couldn't sleep past midnight, that if I didn't become an entrepreneur in the next 5 years, I would be forced to work a minimum wage job forever without any social mobility, since corporate America or the universities would have no interest in me as a Gen Z white man, and I knew that society was about to collapse on an intuitive basis, so I had to figure things out before then. I could see this was the world around me, but the thing is that no one at that time really talked about what went wrong in our society that screwed over most Americans. The disjoint between my lived reality and the mainstream narrative that even almost all normies parroted was a big reason I started studying the world and history, and also became a right-winger. As a teenager, I started calculating every single way the regime screwed my demographic of young white men over. The most obvious answer was deindustrialization and globalization, since my home city of Philadelphia went from one of the wealthiest cities in the world to the poorest and most crime-ridden of America's top 10 largest cities. America had enormous tariffs when we industrialized in order to protect our own manufacturing from more advanced European countries from the early 19th century until World War II. The tariffs America built its own industry off makes Trump's look like child play. One of the things Peter Zeihan explains really well is that America made the current globalist model our core strategy at the time of the Cold War after World War II, where America could leverage both its enormous wealth and superiority in that America was a majority of the world's economy in 1950 as a way to convince the world to not go for communism. What happened is that in the world America made, the vast majority of Americans became worse off than before, while a small elite did vastly better. I was always shocked globalism was a genuine political position, since I always wondered, what loyalty can a world evoke? There's no shared culture, there's no shared history, experiences, or stories. We're all different people with our own stories. What does supporting world peace even mean psychologically? What does that evoke inside of you? However, the reason the elite supports globalization is that by weakening the culture of individual places, creating a international globo homo, they can destroy the standards of any given place. In the West's case, pesky things like freedom, the individual, Christianity, or honor that keep them from taking global power over every element of the average Westerner's life. On top of this, they can leverage different areas' core strengths against that individual area. Let's say using the cheap labor of Southeast Asia, China's enormous industrial facilities, Europe's fashion, or America's intellectual power in order to exploit each area as efficiently as possible, with them as the arbiters of the relationship taking the best cut. One of my friends has a term called pinkerism, or the main ruling ideology of our society that since we have more toilets in Africa, the complete collapse of American society is acceptable. In short, their ruling belief is line go up equal world gooder. The elite has done literally everything they could have possibly done to lower the value of human labor. This includes globalization, importing downwards of 100 million immigrants in the last lifetime, many of whom illegally, bringing women into the workforce, automating, and now AI. On a statistical basis, the things above which caused the largest depreciation of labor are firstly the introduction of women into the workforce, and secondly automation, which is coming from Peter Turchin's statistics. I find it completely morally reprehensible that
Yeah, and we checked this out, but what is AI going to do to a lot of jobs? Like, people will just be left with nothing, bro. Especially like the white collar work. You'll just be replaced by AI, and then what then? There's already talks. I hear it, like whispers about like UBI. Was it universal basic income, basically? And it's very, very like it's very scary to look at, because some people say, "Oh no, it's just like every other like breakthrough. It's like we'll figure it out." And it's like, nah, I don't really see how. I don't know.
that these people in statistics. I find it completely morally reprehensible that these people as leaders have a moral duty to take care of their own populations and instead completely betrayed them. The nation is a family in which the rulers are by definition responsible for the shared culture, genetics, population, and identity of the people in their country. When you're talking about immigration increasing the economy, managing a society as an economic zone was never the goal, but instead the living, breathing nation itself, which stems back centuries. The insane thing is that in the current worldview, questioning any of this is completely taboo, while at the same time, these are completely arbitrary opinions picked by the self-interest of the ruling class. I never get how elites will make a strategic calculation based out of their own self-interest, and then the masses treat it with religious fervor. Questioning free trade, immigration, or regulatory systems is seen as bigoted, racist, or sexist, which just makes zero sense, but it's simply the managerial class's attempt to hold on to power. The reason we import tens of millions of Latin American, barely literate people, but educated Anglos struggle to migrate here, is that for the managerial class, the first are cheap labor, which push down wages for the American working class, thus making their lives cheaper, and for the latter, it's competition for their educated jobs. The horrifying classism that came out of the left after Trump was always just completely disgusting to me. These are people who claim to care about the downtrodden as their number one thing, but at the same time, they say that anyone who votes for Trump is an illiterate peasant whose opinion shouldn't be counted. They openly say that we need a cheap labor supply from elsewhere, which keeps wages down for normal Americans. The left keeps the price of housing high, which you can see in red states having significantly cheaper housing, which is easier to build, which young and lower class Americans spend over 60% of their income on. I remember the most influential leftist streamer until recently, Destiny, posting a meme about saying that people on a flight are asking to be the pilot as a metaphor for the lower classes asking for governance from the educated. I was shocked, since this is such naked elitism and aristocracy. This is the exact kind of thing the nobility would have said 500 years ago, and the left has zero self-awareness about it. I remember a leftist woman complaining she couldn't date anyone without a degree since they were inferior. I replied, so the nobility and lowborns can't mix, right? One of my good friends is an American expat who lives in...
That reminds me, there was actually one time I tried to pick up a girl. And it's like, she kind of gave me a half shot. She asked me like, okay, what do you do then? And I was honest because I didn't care. I said, I'm a carpenter. Bro, the look on her face, like it just went from like this and that like they just eyes, the mannerism, everything changed. And I was like, holy shit. So that's what you think about fucking workers, huh? Goddamn students, bro. I'm telling you, you grow up, you learn a lot when you enter the fucking workforce. When you leave the fucking playground, when you leave school and start working alone, you start to develop like a lot. Your character, your personality, you develop a lot, because in school there's a bunch of stupid ideas going around and distractions everywhere. Yeah. But yeah, the girl looked at me with complete contempt. I was like, oh fuck.
Mexico and mix, right? One of my good friends is an American expat who lives in Mexico, and he likes to say that our elite is trying to Mexicanize America. What that means, not simply on a demographic basis, is that Mexico is an innately aristocratic society, stemming from the Spanish conquest, which divided the country up between about a dozen ruling families who controlled most of the economy. Mexico is the best country to be an elite, in which the courts are biased for you. You have infinite servants from the enormous poor population. Only the elites get to live a first world life, while the entire society caters to them. The elite is trying to turn us into Mexico, firstly by importing Mexicans, then on a cultural, political, and social basis. They're trying to turn us into serfs. You will own nothing and be happy, as they've literally said. My best friend's from a working class family in Boston. He and a lot of his network are from old stock Mayflower Yankees, and when I visited his hometown several times, it's so dystopian how his set, or local working class people, have been completely screwed over by the leftist elite. Working class people in blue states have zero social mobility, and whenever I go to Boston, every single job I see is either automated or done by an immigrant, frequently one who can't even speak English. Let I remind you, this is about as far from Latin America as you can get while still being in America. I keep finding this in blue states, where the managerial class see the previous American inhabitants the way we saw the Native Americans. The Yankees have been completely betrayed by their own elite. The rapid social collapse has been horrifying to watch. I'm only 23, so I remember the old America a little bit, partially since I grew up in a rural area, a few decades behind the rest of America culturally. I remember the old America, which was a middle-class country in which social mobility was expected, built around the cultural needs of the American people, a place where freedom and basic decency...
From my experience trying to find different work, that shit is fucking impossible. Jobs are getting harder and harder to get, even here in Norway. I was on like a like the government gave me like a what's it called? I went there. It was like a 6-week like course, and basically I remember one of their like classes, they showed us a video that basically said that full-time work, or like real work and real jobs, they're getting rarer and rarer, and you will be working basically like part-time or like gig work. Like they basically said like, oh, the job market is heading into gig economy, or like gig work. But I mean, with AI, that shit is gonna disappear. And one of the companies I worked at, that shit is probably like that company is probably gonna go to shit, but it's like I work at a carpentry, you know, I worked at a carpentry like firm, or like what happened was they started hiring like super DEI, like straight up like max level DEI. Like we got lesbian black women in, like I'm not joking. That is what was hired. And we no longer got like the best men that could do carpentry work. Like all you got was like DEI hires in carpentry, like businesses and shit. Like that shit is insane. Yeah, I mean, my prediction, the company's gonna go to shit in a few years. Like that's just how it is.
Decency was taken for granted, cultural needs of the American people, a place where freedom and basic decency was taken for granted, with open discussion, a place where it was just assumed everyone could get married and have children, even poor people. Poor people used to be able to buy houses, where middle-class people took vacations, where the weekends were normalized, people loved Hollywood, and kids would just play outside without even thinking. In our current society, we simultaneously are completely incapable of acknowledging that that old country ever ended, and at the same time, people will deny that it ever existed. I remember that country with my own mind, and I find it so heartbreaking so many pretended it never happened. Whenever I talk about this, people say things were always this way, or that things were just as good now, which is really a disgusting Schrödinger society. By every conceivable metric you could possibly choose, the average American's quality of life has collapsed precipitously. This is borne out in a bunch of different statistics, as Peter Turchin covers eloquently. Gen Z has 90% less spending power per capita as the baby boomers did in their 20s. Gen Z is too poor to create culture or even go out to drink. Young people are too poor to mate or form families. This is why we have the worst birth rates in history. Wages have completely stagnated as cost of life has skyrocketed. The average young or poor American has 3/4 of their income taken from them for just existing, in that they spend 60% of their income on rent, while the state takes a big chunk in Social Security and taxes, let alone food or essentials. This is why most Americans have
Yeah, and you're kind of clowned on if you don't fucking move out at fucking 16. Like you're clowned at if you don't live alone at 18. But the thing is, it's kind of a more financially smart move if you can stack up some bread while living at home with your parents. If you have that option, and you might be able to land somehow on your fucking feet when you go out. I mean, I was thrown out, you know, very early, and if I had the option to stay a year or two while working, I would have been in such a better position. Like, holy shit, I would be in such a better position. But, yeah.
less than funds, let alone food or essentials. This is why most Americans have less than $500 in the bank. This doesn't even deal with intangible factors which we completely devalue in our culture. The reason other societies procreated in poverty and formed stable cultures, while we do not, is that they had social institutions we got rid of. With religion, community, family trust, and values, you can live in poverty while knowing that people will help you out through financial issues, babysit your children, hang out with you after work, and you'll have a meaning or moral code to explain how the world works. The reason mental health is so disastrous among Gen Z, around 40% having a diagnosed mental illness, is that they're completely consumed by nihilism. There's a very important historic event.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the only option you have now. And I see it everywhere I go. It's like incredible to me how these like leftists, like especially these women, I notice. It's they're such like virtue like signalers. They're like, oh, this is bad, like this war, and give money to this and this fucking charity and all that shit. And they are the most miserable nihilists I've ever fucking met. Like, holy fuck. Where the fuck are the men like me? Huh? I need to find some good brothers. Because I'm sick of this shit, man.
Event called the
Like, fuck.
they're completely consumed by nihilism. There's a very important historic event called the disenchantment of the world that anthropologists talk about, through which we move from a concept of the world in which the entire universe is alive and full of meaning and spirits and beauty, and that meaning is inside existence itself. And I've put a lot of effort into studying the disenchantment, and it's a complex topic in itself. But one of the points I find very interesting is that when you look at the trajectory, you'll find that it's correlated with wealthy industrial societies, where when you're not a wealthy industrialized society, you'll have an enchanted, mystical view of the world. And I'll push this back to...
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty fucking obvious that when you're more out, when you're less in that bullshit, and maybe you're more in the countryside, life's a little bit slower and better in some ways. It's like, yeah, you're not a fucking... you're that instead of being like a fucking rat surrounded by fucking concrete in these urban areas where everybody fucking hates each other. Social trust or like we live in such a low trust society where you have to look over your fucking shoulder on everyone. And it's like, even me, like, I'm getting more and more, like, I'm getting sick and tired of every dude I fucking see seems to give me the fucking stink eye. Like, they just look at me. I'm like, what the fuck are you looking at me with that look for? Like, even I am getting a little bit, what's it called? Like, I'm getting I'm getting like these bad looks for no reason at all. I can even be fucking smiling and people just look at me with contempt. I'm like, fuck, bro. Put me in a small little village. Let me just fucking disappear from this bullshit. Nah. I need to stay in more like urban areas because that's where the people are. That's kind of where you meet like talented people. So, but I see now people are getting more and more like, they're starting to like, the mask is starting to fall off in people. That's what I'm trying to say. It's before maybe they pretended to fucking smile and be happy, but now it's like blatant that people are just fucking miserable living in these conditions, bro. You're a little cog in this fucking machine. Managers everywhere, bureaucracy everywhere. You don't know the name of anyone in your store, your fucking neighbors. Your neighbors look at you with fucking with angry look in the like. You get no women. Dating apps are fucking. Like, what can you do, bro? What can you do? My advice: just go on a fucking mountain with nobody around and just enjoy the nature and think how you can make more money. How can you be stronger? Because this world will only continue to get worse. So you must attain strength. Anyone who says, "Oh, you don't need strength. You don't need to know how to fight. You don't need money." Fuck them. You want to win, and by winning I mean fucking reproduce. You want to pass down your fucking seed. That is your fucking biological mission. Then gain strength. Fuck everything else. I don't know.
Science a little, you'll have an enchanted, mystical view of the world. And I'll push this back to science a little bit earlier. And afterwards, you don't. And in each case, it's not really a rational argument, which I explained in this text wall. It's more so that just it's considered not scientific to believe in these things. Well, it's not explained while science has to be our entire moral code. And what I think actually happened here is that belief in things like religion or mysticism or magic was seen as low-class behavior that upper-class scientific people should not do because they're too rational and successful through modern methods to need those sorts of silly things. And that's what's borne out in the statistical evidence from demographics. The reason that within the
Makes
last
sense.
lifetime we lost all of those social institutions I spoke about earlier is that the boomers got rid of the culture and society since they didn't need it, since their age group was so wealthy. What they did was put their children in a terrible place where their society makes no sense since they have none of the wealth necessary to uphold the lack of social institutions. People tend to see decadence, or the phase of social collapse we're facing now with a declining society, as a symptom of insane wealth or degeneracy. That's true initially, but as the society degenerates, most people fall into poverty while they lose the social institutions that would maintain the degeneracy itself. Decadence always ends in the old world peasant, beaten.
And what happens when people become so fucking poor they can't distract themselves with fucking drugs or alcohol and all that shit? What happens then, man? Like, fuck.
Down my millenniacy itself. Decadence always ends in the old world peasant, beaten down by millennia of the tyranny of culture, state, and family. We see the huddled peasants of Egypt or India as primitive, while in reality, they are the endpoint of civilization going longer than ours has now. We Westerners are still somewhat savage, since we were cowboys or Vikings not too long ago. Our freedom and vitality are barbarian remnants. We can't afford to lose them. Part 3, GSR.
For me, I'm not a cowboy or Viking. I'm more of just like a basic barbarian. Like, think of like a steppe barbarian. But I don't know. With like family, I don't know how the tree goes. So maybe I'm completely wrong. I don't think I got that Viking or a cowboy. I don't think so. I'm more of just a simple barbarian.
Remnants. We can't afford to lose them. Part 3, GSR. When our society lies, it does so by stating a slanted half-truth while completely ignoring the opposite point, which is even more true. Yes, toxic masculinity is a real thing, and we are the least toxically masculine society ever. Toxic masculinity is Genghis Khan and Hitler. The thing is that our society is completely destroyed by toxic femininity, something that we can never discuss publicly. It's insane how great the scope of toxic...
Yeah, that's one of the like taboo. That's one of the taboo. Taboo like conversations you can have. You're not supposed to talk about this. There's many other things you're not supposed to talk about in modern society, because that starts to wake fucking people up, and the truth hurts. Awa, boo boo. My fucking feelings are hurt. My worldview is complete bullshit. I need to get my ego fucking bruised. And you're not allowed to do that in society anymore. You're not allowed to just speak the fucking truth. And that's all I give a fuck about.
Femininity is completely destroyed by toxic femininity, something that we can never discuss publicly. It's insane how great the scope of toxic femininity is, and how practically nothing is written on the topic. I recently read a super good book by Joyce Bennison called Warriors and Worriers that covers this. I'm kind of impressed this middle-aged, I would guess leftist female academic wrote such a cutting book on toxic femininity. I think it's a real bellwether for the culture where we all know that this is real and it's horrible, and I think people are just frankly getting tired of it. Remember when people said women were innately more moral than men around a decade ago? In the time since, that opinion has just become seen as completely insane now. I would argue mostly due to the downstream effects of the internet. Female relational warfare, or it's
What a stupid idea, bro.
also mostly due to the downstream effects of the internet. Female relational warfare, or it's also called GSR, that being gossiping shit.
Like, it's incredible to me how these ideas, I mean, probably a lot of them are like purported by, or they're pushed by bots. A lot of the internet is fake. You have to like accept that. A lot of the internet is fake with bots and AI and all that shit. where you think you're maybe commenting with someone who is real, but they're fake. And like these ideas, they spring from, like, I don't know where, like they don't use real history in their shit. They, I mean, a lot of people don't even have like common sense anymore. The fuck is happening, man?
Gaming and rallying is how women manifest aggression rather than war like men do. GSR is the use of social tools to lower others' reputations and secure your own higher status. It's also called drama, which for thousands of years was widely considered to be women's worst trait across cultures. However bad you imagine GSR to be, just triple it, and this is borne out in all the evidence or statistics. As an example, there's the famous study that hairdressers will purposely cut the hair of women more attractive than them a few inches shorter, but will not do so for women who are less attractive than them.
Damn. Really? So they like, they mess with them. So they make the pretty girls less pretty or attractive.
My friend Homath has a brilliant video called Who's a 10, which does an analysis of this through the lens of why it's such a common phenomena that women will say all women are 10 out of 10's attractiveness, which they obviously can't believe if you watch their actions. The reason for this is that the idea that all women are beautiful, and in fact, equally so, is a convenient strategic argument for women of different levels of attractiveness. What we keep finding with the studies is that female social networks are completely dependent on agreeing to an external mask of equality, while in reality, that's just a cover for low-trust competitive strategies. Women are terrified of appearing like they're trying to do better than other women. Women try to avoid the appearance of competition with other women while in fact they are. This is partly due to the removal of physical violence, which creates a lack of an incentive to beat people into good actions, while until recently female social status was dictated purely by beauty rather than capability like it tends to be for men. One of the things I learned from both talking to women as well as Joyce Bennison's book is that in female social structure, they're scared of being successful because in that case, their friends might no longer like them because their friends might envy them. And that's just so brutal, because what's the point of having friends if they don't support you in attaining excellence and doing cool stuff? They're not your real friends. And when this channel took out and I dropped that...
Yeah, I mean, friendship between women is fucking horrendous. That's why for a lot of women, it's kind of better to have a good man that supports them, but that shit's it's non-existent in today's society.
College and tough. They're not your real friends. And when this channel took out and I dropped out of college and became much more successful than my peers, it was so dispiriting that so many of them were not happy that I was successful, because I was thinking, wait, did you ever actually like me? And that's how I feel about a lot of this stuff, where I just find it completely unacceptable that women don't support other women. In female social settings, it's frequent that obvious things aren't discussed, since they create awkwardness for people trying to perpetuate low-trust strategies. As you can see, this all applies to modernity, which is very heavily feminized, with, in this instance, why modernity doesn't explain anthropology, biology, history, or how the world works honestly, since in doing so, it would show how low-trust the left is. This also involves the need of a mask for equality, fear of appearing competitive or aggressive in today's culture, while people are still jockeying for status behind it. All of this is at odds with male norms, which tend to deal with aggression or status conflicts directly, while not feeling a need for equality. This is why in historic societies, which were more masculine, they had titles of nobility, epic mythologies, or waged war for the fun of it. It's completely reasonable and rational to think that as women got more power over the course of the industrial age, that the society itself would take on the traits of toxic femininity as the society is the end point of the people involved. The thing with GSR is when you see it, you can't unsee it. The nature of toxic femininity is all mate suppression. The underlying nature of toxic femininity is to abdicate responsibility as much as possible, while also lessening risk as much as possible. This is why historically, going back to the Greeks or Romans, the correlation between feminism and the welfare state is so strong. Women then use interpersonal relationships and communication in order to achieve said aims. The insidious thing is that women evolved to be incredibly good at this, since these were traits that were rewarded in humanity's evolutionary environment. Due to the emphasis on the abdication of responsibility, the onus for female communication is to imply as many things as possible while operating under a field of plausible deniability. This is why flirting is the way it is, existing within a range of plausible deniability and timing, in which as you flirt, you have the potential to pull back at any time due to the realization that said relationship is not worthwhile. When you look at female communication, this explains a truly vast amount of it. When you wonder why a woman does something you don't understand, try to figure out how it either balances her own emotional state or how it allows her to abdicate responsibility. For toxic masculinity, you can see it from very overt signs, that being burnt out cities and corpses littering the streets. But for toxic femininity, for this reason, it's nigh impossible to spot unless you're actively looking for it. Frequently, you'll only find it in retrospect after it's already happened. Women have literally evolved to do this and have social camouflage like a chameleon, which allows them to metaphorically hunt more easily. I'm always in shock women don't take courses or read books or any of that stuff to learn these highly complex social games. They just do it intuitively. However, the effects of toxic femininity.
Yeah, and we dudes, we have to read like fucking complex as fuck books on shit so we don't get tricked. And I mean, as a man, you can kind of figure it out as well on your own. If you do fucking indulge enough in this shit, like you will learn female nature. Like you'll just see it blatantly in front of you if you are that guy that gets a lot of women.
Are beyond, just do it intuitively. However, the effects of toxic femininity are beyond obvious once you spot them. They can frequently completely destroy a society. Toxic femininity results in a low social trust culture. It causes environments of mutual suspicion in which everyone hides who they truly are, where nothing gets accomplished, or where normal human relationships, including procreating, have become impossible. Not treating toxic femininity as real, while acknowledging toxic masculinity, is in effect avoiding a specific type of crime or a crime against the shared society. Most of toxic femininity boils down to greed from an individual woman, where women evolved due to the enormous costs of child rearing alongside their physical weakness, at the expense of the collective culture. The worst side of female nature is immaturity, whether pettiness, greed, envy, or weakness. To look at some examples of this from politics, the left has used GSR on an industrial transcontinental scale. The reason leftism works so well is that Marxism and its descendants create a pretty sounding ideology which, in effect, due to their complete abdication of responsibility, means that the left can rationalize literally everything for their aims. As I have said before in these two videos, leftism is toxic femininity as an evolutionary strategy containing all the trademarks, whether the removal of competition, risk, envious redistribution of resources, removal of freedom, and criticism. GSR becoming the entire society and putting pleasant fictions above reality. The thing is that literally everything in leftism is some form of mate suppression, since women have none of the incentives of group cooperation that men evolved to have. Keep in mind, men went through twice the evolutionary pressures that women did, caused by war, and the womb being so expensive versus sperm. That means that twice as many women reproduced as men did. Men are bound together as a group since they needed to fight for war, which killed 20 to 40% of men every generation in prehistoric societies consistently. Meanwhile, women's only evolutionary pressure was their own children, thus women have a cognitive bias towards greed in order to provide for their own offspring. This is why female social groups are so often toxic, and I do not envy women's social position. Female relations are based off vulnerability, in that women, especially during child rearing, are profoundly vulnerable. This is why women value sharing their emotions and attention seeking socially, since they're testing to see if you're trustworthy with their weakness. However, since there's no loyalty or honor inside female social groups, what happens is that female social groups are constantly filled with drama, in which social relationships break apart over silly things. Throw on top of this, we've consistently found from studies that women actually benefit from causing drama evolutionarily. It's common sense that society needs to be built around stopping violence, but it doesn't go.
Yeah, it's like to kind of move up or level up as a woman, I would imagine. Like if you make rumors and talk shit about other women to kind of make yourself look better for a man, you get better, you know, genes. You get better man in the end. And they'll do what they must to get the best genes. But I just wanted to say, like, fuck, thank God I'm a man. Like, thank God. Because even with all the suffering and loneliness and all the shit and hate you get from just existing as a man today, thank God, bro. Because there's still a shot at that brotherhood, at that genuine, true brotherhood. Dare I say love. Because for me, love from a woman, I mean, that shit is just conditional. It's like kind of whatever. But like, if you have proper brothers, I mean, fuck, you can't even, you can't put a price on that, bro. Man, you can't put a price on that. So, yeah.
Go to reason and sense that society needs to be built around stop.
I think the lows are lower and the highs are higher. If you are a man in living as a, if you are a man, that is. And yeah, you just get to experience life more. If you work hard and you dedicate yourself to something. If you're not one of these weak ass nihilists, that is.
Stopping violence evolutionarily. It's common sense that society needs to be built around stopping violence, but it doesn't go to reason in the same way that it would be true for toxic femininity. The reason for this is that the mechanism which stopped toxic femininity was called society and social norms. Women did not engage in these behaviors anywhere near the same degree 500 years ago, since women existed in intensive social webs under the responsibility of their fathers or husbands. If a woman spread lies or was a complete slut, she'd be ostracized by the village community, which had a shared moral code enforced by religion and disciplined by her.
Yeah, but now that shit is like champion. That shit is like, oh my god, you go, girl. You slept with fucking 1,000 men. Let's go. It's like, again, with what he said, the shit makes absolute sense, bro. The abdication of what he said, responsibility and like accountability and all that shit. They want to have the ability to do it all with no consequences. Like you can do all the heinous shit you want, degenerate shit all you want, with no what's the word? With no consequence, right? You still want to be looked at as that sweet little fucking pretty girl angel, but you're not. With your actions, you're ruined. But you want the world to view you as not. That it doesn't work like that, bro.
Guardian had a shared moral code enforced by religion and disciplined by her guardian. In pre-modern England, and this was true across most societies, it was literally illegal for women to slander and cause drama, since it was called disturbing the king's peace. Throw on top of this laws against witchcraft.
Damn, that shit wasn't based.
Disturbing the
It
king's
was
peace.
it was illegal to disturb the peace. Bro, what the fuck? Bro, this is what I'm telling you, bro. Like, history, bro, I fucking love history. Wait, let's hear that again.
In England, and this was true across most societies, it was literally illegal for women to slander and cause drama since it was called disturbing the king's peace. Throw on top of this laws against witchcraft, which can be pretty directly interpreted as principles against toxic femininity. What a combination of the breakdown of traditional society caused by urbanization and modernization with the internet recently is that it broke down all barriers against low trust female behavior. In fact, we made it our religion. The worst element of female behavior, or trying to suppress the fertility of other women, became our entire culture. If you guys ever feel bad, keep in mind that the people women hate the most are other women, not men. As a comedian once said, men want to understand women, while women do understand women and they hate each other.
A point which I think is important but goes unsaid is that the real targets for mate suppression are women, not men. Because if you look at the subconsciouses of the people pushing this, they don't really think about how these men relate to society outside of a sexual status-oriented context. What that means is...
Yeah, we talked about this before many times, but with everything that has gone wrong, it is women that are most screwed over. It really is. We as men, I mean, there's men like me who kind of see it, and then it is like, it is what it is. Like, you just try to live life, like, the difficulty has increased, but you still enjoy life at a certain level. But with women, I mean, fuck, they have lost everything, completely everything. And yeah, I mean, you got turned into a work slave. You don't get children. You grow old and miserable. You don't have real friends. You drown in what, fucking wine boxes or whatever. You over obsess with politics, which makes you more and more miserable. Like, man, if you just look at it, it's like women have been fucked over so much. Of course, men as well. But what I'm trying to say is, like, men are fucked, or men are screwed, like, great, but women are screwed horrendously. That's what I'm talking about. It's like they're like a level or a few levels above. So, yeah.
Is that they're not actual status-oriented context. What that means is that they're not thinking of these men as individuals. They're thinking of them as people who get paired up with women. So this is low-status women trying to remove the reward for luckier women who get with higher-status men because they envy them. This isn't a man versus woman issue because fundamentally women suffer as much from mate suppression as men do. It's you are enabling the worst demographic of women possible so that pro-social women face the harshest consequences. To jump back on a larger scale, for a few examples of mate suppression in politics, the first is child car seats. In America, we've had a law for a while that children have to ride in very specific elevated car seats for their own safety. These seats are expensive and difficult to maintain, while furthermore, only specific types of cars, which happen to be more expensive, have the space to fit them. The effects of this have been saving something like less than 10 lives since 1980 and preventing 150,000 births by people who can't afford the seats or cars. This is a very obvious example of mate suppression. As another example, when I was growing up, helicopter parenting was an obsession. My parents were seen as strange for letting me have agency as a child, not monitoring every single moment of my life. I knew parents which walked their kids.
Yeah, it's good for fucking development. Just let your kid do the thing, and as long as they don't do like stupid shit that can get them in trouble or hurt, It's like, bro, just let the kids be kids. But of course, society is getting more and more dangerous. Yeah, I mean, if you're more rural, I mean, you can just kind of let them go. But in cities, you gotta be more careful.
For monitoring every single moment of my life. I knew parents which walked their kids 4 blocks to school every single day until the end of high school, picking them up at the end of class too, or controlled what their children spent money on until the end of high school. The thing that shocks me is that people didn't predict this would have the psychological effects it would on my generation, which it so obviously did, of turning us into neurotic wrecks incapable of functioning as adults. At the same time, these very same parents didn't grow up like this themselves, with this trend coming in around 2000, so they themselves know it's unnecessary. Helicopter parenting, I nearly said helicopter Karening, is very clearly an upper or middle class trend, since they are the people with the resources to get stuck on this kind of retarded bullshit. Helicopter parenting was enforced by the society, though. Many parents literally had the police called on them for letting their children play outside without supervision. There's just so many crazy news stories about this. Through the prism of mate suppression,
Yeah, it's like, wasn't there a thing where like children were playing in their backyard alone without like adult supervision? They were just playing outside in their backyard, and like a Karen phoned the police. Like, oh my god, the children, blah 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 blah. You can imagine it, right? Like that shit is just insane. Like, fuck.
there's just so many crazy news stories about this. Through the prism of mate suppression, this is very clearly the upper and middle classes using female hysteria over children as a way to enforce upon the working classes a tax of time and effort that they can scarcely afford. You could also talk about a bunch of other stuff like this when I was growing up, of parents obsessing over driving their kids to events, doing special programs for them, special diets or whatever. I hate how many parents sacrifice all of their hobbies and adult friends or their lives to supervise children who in turn become resentful and dysfunctional from it. If you compare the adults who came out of helicopter parenting to those who lived a century ago, it's clear that this is not a good system to produce adults. None of our ancestors had this, and they turned out fine. This is all mate suppression, much like economics, in which big companies push for regulations as a way of hurting smaller companies. Is it any surprise that major companies rose from 20% of the economy in 1960 to 80% today as they use the regulatory framework to weaken small businesses? In the process, we've seen a collapse of small businesses and middle-class America.
It's funny, we went through all the different ways, very different parts.
Yeah, it wasn't like one of the biggest wealth transfers during COVID. It's like how many businesses went bankrupt, and like bigger corporations got bailed out, didn't they? They got bailed out, but smaller businesses they went bankrupt, and like giant wealth transfer happened.
Of life. We went through all the different ways, very different parts of life are indirectly connected to mate suppression, but I forgot about the actual mate suppression, that being how young women just openly tell each other to not have children, where the culture now is incredibly anti-natal, where I know lots of young women who saw it as sort of moral duty to not have children, and that they and everyone else in their friend groups all have a consensus they will not have children. And this is a very big thing for a much larger group of people than I think a lot of people would realize. I think it's a large minority of Gen Z women who are like this, where they've just lost any interest in starting families, and they further each other in this. And that when you look at the music or the movies or the culture or schools or political propaganda, it's all overtly anti-natalist, with a quarter of Gen Z thinking it's morally wrong to bring children into this world. There's a pretty horrifying statistic now that 60% of Gen Z women...
Holy quarter. Like, it's immorally, like, it's not morally right to bring life into this world. Like, bro, what the hell? What the hell is happening, man? Fuck.
just do not want to have children. Pretty horrifying statistic now that 60% of Gen Z women just do not want to have children, and a larger number are unsure if they want to. For example, at the start of the Barbie movie, which was the biggest cultural event of the last year, I think, they show a child breaking dolls and breaking her connection to matrimony and childbirth, and then they play the Thus Spake Zarathustra music from 2001: A Space Odyssey. So they treat the destruction of motherhood, and they do believe that if you look at the subconscious of their worldview, as a historic level breakthrough. And they tend to view women who do have children with contempt, and they view children with contempt. It's so jarring to go to Mexico, a country in which I've lived for certain periods of my life, to see a society where none of this is the case. You see corner stores and small businesses everywhere in Mexico, since their regulatory framework isn't as insane as ours. Kids play outside in Mexico. Even basic essentials not related to labor cost are cheaper there. The Mexicans are too poor to afford our luxury beliefs and mate suppression. Need I remind you, Mexico is a vastly more dangerous country than America. The entirety of socialism is mate suppression, in that creativity and economic growth is achieved by creative individuals trying to make money or status out of their own free will to power. Creativity is never generated by bureaucracies. What socialism almost always is redirecting money from middle-aged and old white men, who comprise nearly all of America's tax base, to mostly single moms, frequently of ethnic minorities, who comprise most of the recipients of welfare. This is just using the state as another form of mate suppression, as a manifestation of toxic femininity. I find it kind of ironically and darkly hilarious how much of feminism boils down to women using the state and society as a way to make men less competitive versus women, which is just the entire culture. However, women are attracted to men who are more successful than them. And this is one of the reasons why it gets very messy when you try to integrate the sexes together as competitors, where these women complain that none of the men are.
Why did, like, why pit us against each other? Like, it's so fucked. Like,
around them are attractive because they're more successful than them. Well, they have zero self-awareness, and this is the outcome of the society which they chose. As always, mate suppression ends up hurting everyone involved.
I don't meet these people with this kind of fucking self-awareness. They don't, never.
As we can see with the rise of socialism, killing Europe's multi-century dominance in every field possible over the course of the 20th century, which happened at the exact same time as the rise of socialism. You saw Europe lose its empires and lose all of its technological and cultural advantages. The introduction of communism killed Russia's rise to dominance, which was occurring under the czars, while the left is trying to throttle America today. Read this text wall for more info. Part 4. The Walls Are Alive. As I went further and deeper into this topic, I started to break my sense of what my old reality was. In our society, we tend to see our own social structure uncritically. When we deal with stuff like codes of politeness or what's socially acceptable in our society, we tend to just treat breaking convention as innately wrong without thinking why or how these social norms came from or who they serve. There is a distinction between the nerd who does not understand social cues.
Yeah, I mean, expecting people to think like that, I mean, good luck. But I hear what he's saying.
And the alpha they serve. There is a distinction between the nerd who does not understand social cues and the alpha who doesn't care. I like using the phrase "the walls are alive," which is a phrase I invented that signifies to me that something in the baseline of my life, which I took for granted, is actually an active, insidious force which is trying to hurt me. I've realized this about half a dozen times in my life, with one of the bigger examples was the realization that the entire society was a conspiracy to destroy me as a Gen Z white man, which acknowledging a decade ago, or even 5 years ago, was taboo, but it was still true at the time. How many things are like that now, which will be terrible things that will be obvious a decade from now, but which are taboo to say today? Let me give some examples. It's treated as a truism that Christianity is an anti-sex religion, which is also how traditional cultures in general are seen. In reality, religious people have more sex than the less religious, but on top of that, the attitude of the religions predominantly obsessing over sex is a modern thing. The Bible is a complex document of over 1,000 pages, and the interpretations from it are even more complex. In the rise of modernity, Christians have had to compromise on a lot of tenets of their religion. For a lot of stuff in the Old Testament, it's generally understood that this is acceptable and that we don't want to stone people to death for breaking crimes or maintain complex dietary restrictions. However, Christians are very stuck on sexual morality today while completely rejecting their social codes in other ways. I think sexual morality is important and necessary to a functioning society, but it feels weird that Christians are willing to hold the sex equals bad line while surrendering on so many others. For example, feminism is completely against the Bible. Women are supposed to be submissive and not speak in church, according to the New Testament. War and genocide is completely acceptable according to the Bible. The Bible and Christ treat hierarchy as normal and even good. To be frank, Christians have surrendered so much of their culture, I'm always curious where they choose to draw their lines. The entire nature of Christianity itself is based on love, humility, and free will, which is how the pre-modern church interpreted it, with pride being the worst sin. Interestingly enough, in a lot of ways, medieval Europe was a more sexually loose culture than we are today. People in the pre-industrial world would have sex in front of their friends and family. Masturbation wasn't treated as a real sin, in that Catholicism had lots of low-level sins until the 17th century. During the 17th century, nannies would give their boys they were working for hand jobs, which we have records of them doing in front of the French court to a young Louis XIV.
When I first heard that fact, it shocked me, so I checked it, and apparently it's true. And the way it makes sense is that in the pre-modern world, they did not separate sex from hierarchy. So there was an understanding that if you were a nobleman, that if you had sex with your female servants, that was kind of how things worked out because you had authority over them. Then that transferred over to the young son, and so that's how you ended up in a culture where nannies would give boys hand jobs. And the thing with the pre-modern world is they often were significantly more sexually loose than we think, but because they had a fundamentally Christian moral code, they didn't record this stuff as their external facing image, and that's the sort of thing that gets recorded is highly important in history. This is generally true for pre-modern societies, where they didn't record this stuff as a public-facing historic record, but pre-modern societies had much better understandings of private versus public, and so they did lots of weird stuff in private that just didn't get recorded.
The nobility would keep concubines as a normal thing, while courtly love was all about glorifying adultery. There's a great book on this topic called The Evolution of Manners by Norbert Elias, which talks about manners from the Middle Ages until the present. In the medieval and early modern periods, societies, let I remind you, that are vastly more Christian than we are today, knights would write poetry about how much they loved the act of killing. Drinking on the job was completely normal. England's the most peaceful country in Europe, had a murder rate comparable to South Africa, the bloodiest country in the world today. Entire towns would have nude baths together, including post-pubescent women. Nudity in art was normalized. Animal carcasses were carved up at the dinner table in front of guests. People ate with their hands and would use chamber pots in front of others. This was a savage, civilized society. My audience's core demographic and the one I try to represent is young men, and what I tell Christians is that if they can loosen up on stuff like masturbating being a sin, which is mentioned literally nowhere in the Bible, you could probably get young men to take up 5 times as many Christian virtues to balance it out. At the same time, if Christianity was willing to take up masculine virtues like interest in war, heroism, and honor, it would attract young men. This is all things that Christian societies in the past did. The reason that Christianity isn't like this anymore is something that Charles Taylor, one of the most preeminent Christian historians, talks about in his book on the secularization of Western civilization, A Secular Age. In the early modern period, atheism was seen as masculine, or holding out against the chaos of the world alone rationally. This meant that starting around the time of the 18th century, Christianity became highly feminized, which became even more pronounced around the time of the Industrial Revolution. People like to say that men are driven vastly more so by sex than women, but I don't think that's fundamentally true. From various studies and metrics, we find that men have about 7 times the sex drive women do, while at the same time, men also do a lot of other things that women don't. Just look at the stories each sex writes. Men write stories about war, adventure, business, machines, science, history, magic, and other things completely unrelated to the quotidian or daily life, while almost all female stories circle around finding a mate. The ancient Greeks, Romans, and medieval thought women were innately more lustful than men, and I think a case can be made for that. The thing is that once an organization gets feminized, it will devolve into trying to increase the value of the wombs of the women involved, which, need I remind you, is frequently life or death for women. A pretty girl gets to be in the warlord's harem, while an ugly one remains a peasant who starves or is enslaved. Thus, when the church became feminized, it became obsessed with sex, especially so male sexuality, and which we can see that Christians today have been completely incapable of policing female sexual behavior or toxic femininity.
Yeah, it's all they talk about. It's like, dude, don't do this. Dude, don't do that. Hey, man. It's like all they ever do is like shit on men. And I don't agree with like masturbation. Like for me, it's like I don't see it as like, I don't really give a fuck, but you have to know that it is affecting you. It is on like an energy on like an energy level, and also just drive. It kills you when it comes to drive. So yeah, but they never ever hold women accountable, and their promiscuity and shit.
Even of policing female sexual behavior or toxic femininity, even as America was a 90% Christian country a generation ago. The real reason masturbation was such a strong taboo from the 18th through 21st centuries, even more so than sex, which is pretty insane when you think about it, given the massive different cost between them, is that a feminized church needed to make masturbating taboo in order to increase women's sexual value. At the same time, this is why Christians got so obsessed with really petty stuff, like people being too edgy for church, while ignoring the communist takeover of their entire civilization. I don't get why Christians don't fight back harder. You guys don't get it. It's your moral duty to fight to the death to defend your property and honor. The reason sex is so taboo to discuss in polite company today, in a way it wasn't 400 years ago, is that if people were honest about sex, we would realize how much of our society is using sex for low-trust mate suppression. If we were honest, we'd realize women are only attracted to men who dominate them. However, that would destroy feminism. We'd realize the vast majority of young people lose in this equation for the benefit of a few with hypergamy. Alternately, men would realize that obsessing over sex just isn't worthwhile. It's funny that I agree with a lot of the normie Christians about sex, but not for the reason that they do. I just don't think it's worthwhile for a lot of young men. They invest all their time and effort, practically their whole lives if you include the status which feeds into sex, for men to probably get a woman who doesn't even like them that much. There's an over 40% shot she divorces him, the majority of marriages are unhappy, while very few young guys even get married these days or get a girlfriend. The return on investment is not equivalent to the effort.
Most dudes don't. It's very sad, but I would say probably 80% of men who do get a woman or get married and get kids and all that, they don't ever get like the full experience out of a woman. Like the woman is never, like, you're kind of settled for. And that's a very scary thing to look at. Is this is what dudes don't understand, is most likely you are settled for. You don't get, like, most, like, dudes have no idea how women operate when you are fully satisfying her hypergamy, when you are the clear, undisputed winner. When it comes to men, being a man in her eyes. Like, the women are just, like the difference of how they behave and what they do is insane. Because most dudes have to, like, always negotiate shit. Negotiate sex, negotiate chores, negotiate this and this and that. It's like, bro, you get a woman who sees you as the absolute winner, she will do anything you want without even asking, bro. Anything you want. You want I mean, they'll just cook food for you, boom. They'll just do fucking everything for you, boom. You don't even have to say shit. They'll fucking come they'll give you a they'll give you a quick BJ under the table. You don't gotta say shit. But I don't think, like, most dudes don't get to experience that, sadly.
And in this girlfriend, the return on investment is not equivalent to the effort. And in this strange society which is obsessed with sex, while also being squeamish and terrified, you can't sit young men down as an adult and tell them, well, it might save them their lives, all this stuff.
To clarify my position here, because it's somewhat complex, I don't fault major world religions for having strict sexual controls, because if you look at the course of human history and human nature, it's consistently been an effective strategy for the societies involved, because it creates incentives for social cooperation and against degeneracy.
Yes.
I personally am not a fan of highly dogmatic religions, although I think religion is necessary for healthy human societies because it destroys creativity and promotes irrationality, where I'd prefer to have a social code based upon personal honor and responsibility inculcated in the individual. However, I think that's quite difficult to attain and not feasible for most people in history, which is why having a dogmatic religion makes sense. What I am against is using a sort of controlled hysteria to stop the public from talking about sexual realities in a serious way. What we've basically done here is create a very controlled sort of politeness where we can't talk about the reality of the human condition because it's impolite. And this is destroying our civilization. Furthermore, the use of sexual shame in order to control men so that they can't actually follow their own self-interest and understand what's going on, where our society defaults onto sexual shaming immediately if you bring up any uncomfortable questions, which is just so stupid and it's so immature. We shouldn't have to put up with this garbage. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. There was a woman, incredibly, like, the most liberal of the liberal woke women I've ever met. I talked a little about to her about, like, politics and, like, human nature, male, female, human nature, all that shit, like basic common sense shit. I I talked to her and kind of discussed a little, and immediately it's like the fucking wiring malfunctioned in the brain, and she started spewing the bullshit. Oh, you kind of sound like an incel. You're an incel. I am not kidding. I am not kidding. 1 week later, she heard me smash a woman completely. She was yelling and screaming, all that, calling out my name, all of that. She heard that. Just, it doesn't work on me. I'm not one of these losers. I do get women. I see a woman, I approach, boom. Failure is not in my mind. But what can you do, bro? They just immediately do that GSR thing. Gossip, shame, rally. It's like, you disagree with them, gossip, shame, rally. Like, it's the same shit. That's why women are getting... Like, do people not see what the fuck is gonna happen? Men are gonna rally up, they're gonna group up, they're gonna have a formed kind of consensus on this idea that, oh shit, we can't take these fucking women seriously anymore. What is gonna happen? Maybe we should take away their fucking votes or some shit. Like, this is how shit starts to happen. If this continues, is women are just gonna be seen as less and less capable humans in this human like fucking society. They're gonna be seen as less than you know, rational, logical men. I don't fucking know what you want to say. Like, do people not see this? It's like you continue to act bad, you're gonna lose value, and then you're fucked. Then maybe rights start getting taken away. Your fucking personal liberty, freedom is gonna get taken away. Like, you're fucked. But no, you can't see the future and all that shit. All right, you can't just think. You can't use common sense. No. Common sense. What the fuck is that? Huh? What is that?
It's dumb. And it's so immature. We shouldn't have to put up with this garbage. It's just dumb.
We have too much investment in mate suppression in order to be honest, and men have been tricked while they feel too much shame to admit it. This use of social norms for mate suppression is more of the society than you'd think. Our society's main religious belief is ignoring human biology. I mean, the term religion here is how we perceive the world and our entire concept of reality. This is true on multiple levels in which we can't acknowledge racial differences as well as class or sex. Trans is the ultimate culmination of this, which is a complete denial of biology on a level that's just incredibly insane. This is since our society is built off the idea that we can use social engineering to change reality, which is false. The truth is that reality is that half of nearly every trait is genetically coded, and not all people are equally smart, hardworking, kind, or wise. In fact, as we've studied more, the gaps are truly vast between the outliers and the average.
Yeah, but that reality... Of course, these like weak ass nihilists, they are so angry at this reality. They're just like, argh. And then they start burning shit down. I mean, fuck.
As we've studied more, the gaps are truly vast between the outliers and the average. You can look to a society's swear words to figure out what it holds sacred. In the Middle Ages, the swear words were tabernacle, God's bones, or Christ's nails, since that was such an authentically Christian society, unlike ours, which pretends to believe in God well as being purely materialist. However, in our culture, our swear words are fuck, shit, cunt, and bitch, which are all innately biological. We are a culture which, due to the myth of progress, cannot acknowledge that we are all human. Realizing that we're animals would make this entire society fall apart. This is since we are a society in which the human animal suffers, which you can see from the cripplingly bad mental health at the expense of the human ego, which is fed by the delusions of modernity. If we admit that humans are stupid animals who want to procreate, that will shatter all the myths of this society and radically alter every element of the culture. We would start to prioritize our values, families, communities, and societies, since as animals, we would realize that other animals would prioritize those things in order to be happy. An otter can have lots of toys and food, but if it's stuck in a zoo without space to play, a river, or a mate, you can understand why said otter is unhappy. Our society has turned us into zoo animals, and much like how zoo animals don't procreate, neither do we. One of the most chilling books I've ever read was by a primatologist comparing urban human behavior to zoo animals. The thing, though, is that when you add all comparing urban human behavior to zoo animals.
Saving that to later. Maybe I'm gonna read that.
The thing, primatologist comparing urban human behavior to zoo animals. The thing, though, is that when you add all of this up, we've sacrificed everything to mate suppression for nothing in return. Mate suppression has become our religion, social code, politics, child rearing, and discourse. Literally everything has become mate suppression. The very walls of the building we live in are mate suppression. In writing this video, it felt like it was too long, but after covering how so many things are innately mate suppression, I feel justified. We have to cut this out in order to survive, but that involves facing our shadow, something people will often die before doing. That being toxic femininity. Thanks for the idea, Jim. You can really see how it's affected me. Peace.
Let's check some comments. Remember, you don't hate the elites enough. In Canada, a spokeswoman for our national police issued a statement this week that traditional values are a sign of extremism. Holy. Oh, there's no voting your way out of this. The people who are the loudest proponents of these ridiculous policies are often the most insulated from the consequences of said policies. It's easy to cry about abolish the police from the safety of your homogenous gated community. Yeah, that's what I said, but I didn't say police. I said migrants. That's what I said, but I get the idea. I hate it when I think about stuff that horrifies me, and then a dude online, way smarter than me, articulates to an extent that even that it is even more horrifying. Oof. I read a New York Times article today in which the author, who was married in an open relationship, which failed because she left her husband for her lover, simultaneously expressed her utmost contempt and loathing of men, while also wondering why men keep ghosting her. The whole thing was her screeching about how men are what's rotten about being straight, but also demanding men to throw themselves at her feet. We might be the only people alive. Like, fuck, I don't know. Am I like the only fucking real person? Is this a simulation? I think a lot of people are asking these questions, man. My father-in-law keeps saying that he's glad he won't be alive for what's on the horizon. I thought it was weird at first, but now I'm starting to understand. This is unsustainable and something is going to give. Oof. The most nefarious mate suppression is family courts. Ooh. I have PTSD from everything my ex put me through. I wanted 4 children and a happy family life. Now I'm looking forward to homelessness and everything they did to me on her behalf. No, with everything they did to me on her behalf. Oof. Yeah, I mean, the courts are fucked. Why would you ever get married in the West? It just doesn't make sense. And again, the women will like use the thing. Gossip, shame, rally. to make you to like trick you into marriage, and then you're done. Then you're fucked. Oh, you're not a real man. You want to marry. Oh, you're not a real man. Like, you won't commit. You have commitment issues. Oh, you know, like, I think a lot of dudes feel like that. I've been traveling a lot in less fortunate countries, as well as living there for a while. We in the West are very rich in money and opportunities to grow large here compared to there. However, we lack from those places we deem less fortunate is that they are rich in I can do whatever the fuck I want without some bureaucrat getting involved. He got it right. All right. That's gonna be it for me. I catch you boys on the next one. Yeah, like, sub, all that. Yeah, take care of yourself.